Welcome back to the Fulker Lab podcast, where we talk intelligence, strategy, leadership, and that elusive skill called discernment. If you caught episode 1, you remember we talked about an experiment I ran in military joint intelligence centers. Half the analysts got a simple structured technique, hypothesis testing, and the other half did what most of us are trained to do: read the traffic, squint at it, and go with our instincts. The structured group often did better on messy qualitative problems. The big lesson was pretty simple: method beats vibe. Today we're going to see what happens when you drop artificial intelligence and large language models into that world. In other words, what happens when you hand your analysts a supercharged, never sleeps, occasionally delusional intern. Let's get into it. Imagine you walk into your watch floor tomorrow and there's a new team member. This person has read almost everything on the internet, speaks more languages than the United Nations, types faster than anyone you've ever met, and never asks for coffee breaks. That's AI and large language models in a nutshell. Under the hood, we've been using AI and Intel for years. Pattern recognition and signals, face matching and imagery, anomaly detection, and giant databases. That's old news. What's new is the language side. Models that can chew through mountains of text and then talk back to you in normal human sentences. They can summarize reports, answer questions about them, pull out who did what to whom, and even connect dots across sources. The catch is they don't actually understand any of it. They're very sophisticated pattern parrots. Sometimes they say brilliant, insightful things. Sometimes they make stuff up with the confidence of a second lieutenant who just skimmed the field manual. So how are real intelligence agencies actually using this beyond the headlines? Let's start with the CIA. The agency has a generative AI platform for open source intelligence called OSIRIS. It's built by the CIA's open source enterprise, and it hit initial operating capability in 2023. OSIRIS runs entirely on unclassified, publicly or commercially available data. It ingests that huge fire hose of open source material, writes annotated summaries, and gives analysts a chat interface so they can ask questions and drill down into the sources instead of just trusting the magic. Thousands of analysts across all 18 U.S. intelligence agencies are using this thing. CIA's chief technologist has called it an absolute home run, which is not language you usually hear from someone whose day job is worrying. What he means is that it has been a game changer for open source analysts who are buried under foreign language media, social feeds, and random video clips. The tool can provide a first-cut summary of sentiment and trends. Then the human analyst goes in, checks the citations, and refines the judgment. Notice the pattern here. The machine is doing the first pass, not the last word. Now, on the classified side, you'll hear about models like a GPT-4 variant in an air-gapped environment, a version of the tech that lives in a secure cloud, completely isolated from the public internet. The idea is to point LLM capabilities at classified holdings without accidentally telling the whole world what's in your message queue. Details there are obviously thinner, but the direction of travel is clear. They want the same ability to search, summarize, and connect classified text that OSIRIS gives them on the open source side, but inside the vault. So, CIA's model for AI looks a lot like what we talked about in episode 1 with structured methods. The model is an aid to tradecraft, not a substitute for it. It helps you get from wall of text to things a human can evaluate much faster. But you still have to evaluate. Now swing over to Fort Meade and NSA. If an agency was born for big data and AI, it's the folks swimming in signals. NSA has been using machine learning for language tech and pattern detection for a while. Things like identifying speakers, converting speech to text in dozens of languages, and spotting strange behavior in network traffic. In the last year or so, they've also gone big on generative AI. By mid-2024, more than 7,000 NSA analysts had integrated generative AI into their workflows. That's not a pilot with 3 volunteers. That's a small city's worth of analysts asking the machine for help every day. The agency had about 170 AI-related projects in motion, with around 10 of those flagged as absolutely critical to get right from a national security perspective. These tools are already being used in intelligence, cybersecurity, and business workflows. The director said the feedback from the workforce has been overwhelmingly positive, and that the tools are helping analysts work smarter, not harder. In other words, people don't feel replaced, they feel less buried. NSA also created an AI security center, which is classic NSA. They're not just using AI, they're trying to break it. That center looks at vulnerabilities in large language models, how they can be attacked, manipulated, and secured. They're even pushing out unclassified reports to warn industry about those vulnerabilities. Only NSA could simultaneously be the biggest power user of generative AI and the one telling everyone, by the way, here's how this stuff can go catastrophically wrong. Meanwhile, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency is using AI to process ship movements and imagery at planetary scale. The Defense Intelligence Agency is building AI into its big data platform to help analysts query and fuse massive repositories. You see the same pattern across the community. Tools that help you read more, sort more, and get to the thinking part faster. Nobody serious is saying we've automated analysis. What they're saying is we've finally started to read what we collect. So let's talk about the good, the bad, and the slightly unhinged. On the good side, the productivity boost is real. Generative tools can take a stack of reporting and give you a rough summary in seconds. That's not a finished product, but it gives you something to interrogate instead of a blank page. For any analyst who's ever had to write a morning brief on 2 hours of sleep and 3 cups of coffee, that feels like cheating in the best way. They also let you cover more ground. OSIRIS puts a powerful open source assistant in front of thousands of analysts spread across the entire intelligence community. NSA's 7,000 plus users are using these tools for everything from cyber defense to day-to-day analytic work. That kind of scale means you can monitor more topics, more regions, and more narratives than you could with the same headcount 10 years ago. And they help with language and modality. AI systems now handle a lot of the speech-to-text translation and tagging of audio and video content. So analysts who don't speak the source language can still search and examine the material. It doesn't replace human linguists, but it gets you from this is a pile of noise to this is roughly what's in there very quickly. From a structured analysis standpoint, think of these tools as a front-end accelerator. In the experiment I ran, hypothesis testing required analysts to collect evidence for and against each possible explanation. Now imagine you can ask an LLM to pull out every piece of reporting that supports hypothesis A, every piece that contradicts it, and everything that seems neutral. The human still has to decide what weight to give each piece, but the grunt work is lighter. Now for the less rosy part. Hallucinations are the big obvious issue. Large language models will sometimes invent facts, sources, and quotes that sound perfectly reasonable but are completely fake. That's why CIA leadership is insistent that analysts must be able to annotate and explain their sources and reasoning just as rigorously as before. Tradecraft standards haven't changed. They've just got a new step. Check whether the robot just lied to you. Bias is another problem. These models learn from whatever you feed them. If they're trained heavily on open internet content, they've digested propaganda, disinformation, and a lot of garbage. They will happily reflect those patterns back. That means analysts can't treat AI output as neutral truth. You still need to ask, whose narrative is this? Who benefits if I believe it? There's also the very human temptation to overtrust the machine. When you're under a deadline and the AI gives you a clean, confident-sounding paragraph with perfect grammar, it is incredibly easy to say, that sounds right, and move on. The whole point of structured methods, as we talked about in episode 1, is to slow you down at that moment and force you to test your assumptions. AI can either support that discipline or completely bulldoze it, depending on how you use it. And remember, adversaries have AI too. They're using it to craft more convincing phishing emails, generate deepfake audio and video, and flood the information space with cheap, tailored disinformation. So, AI isn't just a tool we use to understand the world. It is also a tool being used to make the world harder to understand. So where does that leave us now? To me, AI and large language models don't overturn the lesson from the original JIC experiment. They amplify it. If your analytic culture is smart people winging it, then giving everyone a generative AI is like handing out power tools at a toddler birthday party. You'll get more output much faster, and a lot of it will be, well, memorable. If your analytic culture is disciplined, if people are explicit about their assumptions and hypotheses, careful about their evidence, and transparent about how they reached a conclusion, then AI becomes a serious force multiplier. It can dig, sort, translate, summarize, and draft. You decide what it means. For analysts, the challenge is to keep your brain in charge. Treat AI like a very capable but slightly unreliable research assistant. Ask it to help you find information, not decide what's true. Use it to feed your structured methods, not replace them. For leaders, the question is how you build policy, training, and incentives that encourage skepticism, documentation, and real critical thinking about AI output. You need people to write, "We used OSIRIS for initial triage and summarization, then independently validated the key points." Not, "We asked the model and it seemed confident." And for all of us in this Volcker Lab community, the bigger issue is how we stay human in the right ways. The machines are getting very good at pattern and language. We have to get even better at judgment, ethics, and the courage to say, "I'm not sure yet," even when the model is yelling, "I'm 100% confident." Which brings us to episode 3. If you've ever thought, you know what would be fun? An entire episode on critical thinking, then you, my friend, are absolutely our kind of person. Next time, we're going to dig into what critical thinking actually looks like in an Intel shop, not as a slogan on a poster, but as a daily habit. We'll talk about simple questions you can build into your workflow, how to argue with yourself in a healthy way, and how to teach your team to push back on both their own instincts and the AI's very polished suggestions. Critical thinking with a side of humor. Sounds like a hoot, huh? Thanks for listening to the Volcker Lab podcast. If this helped you think a little differently about AI and intelligence, share it with someone who's either way too excited about AI or way too terrified of it. We'll see you next time when we try to make critical thinking a little more fun.